Can you hear me okay now, Mayor?
Oh yeah, I can hear you okay. And there's Bobby, she's connecting, so let's give her a chance to connect in. There's Bobby.
Yep,
Maybe.
I'm here.
Okay, all right, well then let's get started. Let's open up this special session on April 28th of the City Council meeting. And this is by remote participation, and it is 5:45, or yeah, 5:47. Can we all figure out how to do the Pledge of Allegiance? However you do it in your position. Brian, will you lead us all?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
and to the republic for which it
one
stands,
nation,
one nation, under God.
liberty and justice for all.
Under God.
Oh, awesome. We're gonna have to work on our track moves there. So let's call this meeting to order. Brian, will you call the roll?
Okay, I'll be with you in a minute.
Okay.
Councilor Whitney?
Did we lose her? There she is again.
Okay. Councilor Maxfield?
Here.
Mayor Holston?
Here.
Councilor Kenyon?
Here.
Councilor McClellan?
Here.
Councilor Hollett?
Here.
And Councilor Forcom?
Thank you, everybody. Looks like we have a full contingent. So this is just a quick special session. Our emergency declaration expires. And this is a discussion and a motion to continue or not to continue. I will entertain a motion from anybody. Well, counselors. No motion? One way or the other?
Kathy,
You're
I'd
muted.
like, I don't think doing a motion. Yeah. go ahead.
Okay. Dawn, you're muted. Chrissy, you started to say something. Bobby, you started to say something. I think what we're going to try to do is use that little blue raise hand so I can see who's doing what. I still don't see a hand.
I don't see where the hand is on my screen.
Oh, okay. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen and click on participants, then at the bottom of that list, there is some options, and one of them is a little blue raise hand.
Okay, I see it now.
Okay, excellent. Great. So again, in order to start this discussion, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Okay. Sorry, I just have to flip screens between this to the agenda so that I can get to the motion. That was my delay.
Oh dear, okay, all right.
Okay, so I move that we extend resolution 04-2020, resolution declaring a local state of emergency due to the present COVID-19 pandemic for a period of 2 weeks to expire at 11:59 p.m. May 15th, 2020, unless sooner terminated or extended again by the council.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was Paul, I think, that seconded.
Yep.
Thank you. And now we're open for discussion. Counselors, do we have any discussion for this?
I have my hand up.
Thank you, Dawn.
I would like to consider a friendly amendment to adjust the date on this to June 4th, which is a regularly scheduled council meeting. And if we were to need to cancel it before then, we certainly could. But it sounds like from what our governor's saying that we're going to be at least to the end of May.
All right. Chrissy, will you accept that amendment?
Yes, I will accept that amendment unless there's any other advice that I shouldn't, but it sounds pretty intelligent to me.
The only comment from the CA is the original resolution does say it's in 2-week increments. However, perhaps that can be overridden by the vote here.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I
So,
considered that as well, and it does seem like, though, that the council, if we decide that it's okay to go that far, that we could make that decision.
I would agree with that too. We made the original one. There's no reason why we can't amend it. And Paul, can you second that again?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Is there any further discussion about this?
So we're changing it to June 4th.
Yes, and Dawn, I see your blue hand.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It's like looking for Smurfs, you know. All right, Brian, will you call for a vote then?
Yes. Councilor Corkum,
Aye.
Councilor Hollett,
Aye.
Councilor Kenyon,
Aye.
Mayor Holston,
Aye.
Councilor Maxfield,
Aye.
Councilor Whitney, Councilor McClellan.
Aye.
Motion
And
passed.
that passes. Thank you very much, everybody. That's, I believe, all we had on there. I will open up to any public comment. We didn't have anybody sign up, but if any member of the public that is here, who happens to be here because of other reasons or just because they want to be here, has anything to say, I am open to hearing. I don't see any nodding heads, so I'm okay. And I don't see anybody who's just called in, so I think we're good there too. Well, we have a few minutes before we can start our budget meeting. So is there, councilors, do you have anything you wanted to comment as far as related to our current state of emergency or anything else? If you wanted to chat about something, I'm certainly open to that, or we can all sit and stare at each other silently until 6.
Well, I can add something.
Yes, please,
So
Bobby.
the senior meal program received a little bit of extra funding to help serve more people through the Meals on Wheels program.
Good.
So they've been able to add more meals for people to come pick up from the meal site or have delivered as long as they have that capacity. And it's due to extra COVID-19 funding. So I don't know if those extra meals will remain when it's done, but for now we're able to serve more people, which I think is great. It's really helpful for the community. So.
And I think that's great too, Bobby. Was wondering, is that open? Do you have to come with a piece of paper filled out, or is that just open to everybody? I was a little confused, and I know you've explained it to me.
So the Meals on Wheels program, it's part of the senior meal program, which is actually has 2 components to it. So normally you have the senior meal site where you can go and have a hot meal twice a week. But because of COVID-19, that isn't an option.
Right.
And then you also have the Meals on Wheels portion where frozen meals and then twice a week hot meals are delivered to people that qualify for that. You don't get Meals on Wheels just because you need it. You have to meet some specific criteria and
Okay.
pretty much be homebound. So you don't have to go with a piece of paper. You just have to meet the 60 and older age requirement to be able to go eat. And it is no cost, but there is a suggested donation if you're able to do that.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess I would just ask all the other counselors that are here, which is all of us, have you heard any issues or concerns about there I am, about food or any other issues in the community that you want to bring to our attention since we have a few minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
That's something else I could bring up, just give you an update, but I realize we only have 5 minutes. It's about the water tower discussion we had a couple meetings ago. Do you guys want to hear about that right now?
I do.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So, and Brian might have some comments on this too. I did send, after our discussion about the water tower, I-
Chrissy, you muted yourself.
so after our last meeting, at some point I sent an email to George explaining to him our discussion we had in council and asking him if he would be still interested in painting the tower a solid blank color. And then we put that out for, kind of a quasi contest for citizen or anybody in the community to come up with a design for it. And we had a little bit of conversation back and forth. He did bring up a couple points. One of them was that he's on kind of a tight timeline to get that paint. It sounded like it might be donated. Or at a, I'm sorry, maybe not donated, but at a lower cost. And that's kind of limited quantities. And then the other thing he had mentioned was he was concerned if he should be even putting that request through TRT, or if that request should be more put directly to the city as a city expense instead of TRT. So we don't have to talk about all of that right now since we only have 2 minutes left. But I just wanted to bring that up, that's my progress with talking to George. And George may have additionally talked to Brian, or Brian might have some additional comments on that.
Yeah, I think Brian has talked to him about it, and there is further information to share. We don't have too much time here, so I'm gonna go ahead and we'll just hold on to that. Thanks, Tracy, for sharing what you did. And we'll just give everybody a 2-minute break if you need to make adjustments, get your water, whatever it is that you need to do before we start at 6.
So hang with me. Some people are having problems getting into the next meeting, so I'll be back in just a second. So Mayor, I inadvertently locked some folks out, so I've unlocked now and they're trickling in. I see the chairman and Rick and Ms. Hooker have joined, and some others are still on the way.
I thought I got lucky.
All righty, so why don't we get started and let the people trickle in who are trickling in, but I think, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Chairman Goldman,
Here.
Ms. Davidson, Ms. Bjarnson.
Here.
Ms.
Here.
Allen. Ms. Allen had mentioned to me she was not going to be able to attend tonight. She didn't think. Ms. Hooker.
Here.
Mr. Weimholt.
Here.
Mr. Walker. And you want to take roll? The counselors are all here. We took the roll at the council meeting. So one last try for Ms. Davidson. I think I see you logged in there.
I think she sent an email to Bob.
Yeah, I see her. She's logged in now. So.
Okay.
All but
Bill, I should say.
Mr. Walker, Mr. Chairman.
All righty, so we've established a quorum. Let's, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from the prior meeting?
I was unable to get the minutes processed and transcribed, so you'll have 2 sets of minutes next meeting.
Very well, moving on. I'm not aware of any old business that's been kept on the record. So item number 5, presentation of and response to committee questions. Do we have any?
Some did come in, so I'll kind of go down the line and kind of let you know where they stand. I had some sort of a longer term one from Councilor Whitney about comparing fire and EMS and public safety departments for same size cities and how they do their business. So that is going to take some time, and so that'll be a longer project. We did talk about also a question about what a city has to do to maintain its municipality status. And really, it's difficult to take away. You have to maintain and provide either through contract or on your own for 4 types of utilities or coverages: utilities, police, fire, EMS, that kind of thing. So Oakridge qualifies, and even with any budget changes, I don't see that would change anything. The other ORS mandates that cities also must hold budget hearings, public hearings, in order to remain a municipality. So those are the 2 issues there. There were some questions regarding the library, and I did not get the response. I'm not sure if the librarian responded directly to Councilor Whitney or not, but there were some questions about increasing fees, that kind of thing, which I haven't seen yet, so I can't respond to it. And Chairman, you asked about how we save money with regards to part-time and full-time folks and putting Captain Higdon back on shift work. So depending on how the union negotiations go, and I do have a meeting this Friday with the team, you're either going to save money in overtime if we're able to change the shift schedules of the full-timers. If the union decides that that's not the case and we can't come to an agreement with that, and they stay on their 48.96 current shift schedule, then the savings would be in part-timers. So obviously those 2 numbers are a little different, but it'll be more obvious once we get union negotiations further down the road and get a tentative agreement on that.
So when you're saying part-time, you're actually meaning agency full-time?
No, sir. I'm saying people-ready part-timers who we contract. We pay the individuals $18 an hour and end up paying people-ready $26 an hour. So we use them as needed. And so if for whatever reason we doubled up on full-timers for a day or 2 days a week, we would not have to hire a part-timer for those 2 days or whatever those doubled up days are. So that would mean that we would save money and people-ready contract money that we pay.
Right. So those people that we're hiring through People Ready, we're only hiring them on a daily basis, so to speak?
Right. We sign them up monthly, but technically they're just contract labor, and it doesn't have to be a week. We can go day by day and say you're working this day and the other one's working the other day, or you're not working at all. So there's no contractual requirement to work them.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Is there anything else, Bill, as far as?
Maybe I just a quick summary of the changes that we
Sure.
made. I won't put anything up. I'll just talk through it. I sent all of you, hopefully you got a little updated budget summary from me during the week that had the budget as proposed and another column on the right side of as revised. There were 2 primary changes in those numbers. One was a reduction in the requirements for the police force. Chief Martin has done a very good job in managing his manpower there, managed to come up with some significant savings there. And so we commend him for that. That was about, a net basis was about $90,000 savings.
90 or 90?
Excuse me, 90. Yeah, 90,000. Then the other significant change was something that we had known about for a while, and that was the increasing the budget for the volunteers in the EMS fire area. That was about $30,000, and that was basically to bring that budget back up to where it was historically when the volunteer force was going full bore, was fully staffed and was going full bore. So a net impact there was a savings of about $60,000. Basically, that occurred in the general fund and in the EFS fund, and as a result of that, we were able to reduce the loans from the other funds by that $60,000 and put that money up in the reserve for future expenditures, which is a very, very good thing. So those were the two significant changes in the budget from the original proposed budget to the revised budget. I just want to mention I did send out you a revised budget just a little bit ago. And that was just because I had inadvertently over in the right-hand column where I had the the revised budget for FY21, I inadvertently left the full-time equivalents for the FY20 year in there when I sent out the schedule. So I didn't want anybody to think that we were going to go up from 20 some FTEs to 26 FTEs. That's not, we're not going that direction. Any questions for me?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Can you, I don't know if I didn't hear it correctly, but could you explain again why the FTEs are down in the police department from 7.5 to 6.0?
I can. Well, actually, maybe I'll call on the chief to chime in on that. Chief, would you like to talk a little bit about the reorganization in your area there that took the FTEs down?
Yes, that would be reduction of one full-time FTE from patrol and reduction of a half-time FTE from our clerk.
How can we afford to do that as from an aspect of coverage?
We will have less coverage.
So what kind of coverage will we have?
Well, part of it's going to depend on what happens with the union contract, so I can't completely say that, but we won't be able to do 12-hour shifts anymore, most likely, to have 24-hour coverage. So we should go down to 18 to 20 hours coverage, some days 22 hours with someone on call.
And with that being
There's
said,
a lot of,
go ahead.
There's a lot of moving parts with that, so.
If we went down to 3 working 10-hour shifts, when we get a lot more in overtime call-outs?
Potentially, yes.
So, I mean, I don't see how that's beneficial to cut a full-time employee if it's potentially going to make it cost more in overtime.
I agree with Priscilla.
So do I.
So Chief,
Yes,
I understand what the numbers are and why you got to this point, but can you explain or just talk a little bit more about your comfort level? I mean, we all agree. I mean, there's no doubt that we all agree that we would like more coverage rather than less coverage. That's a given. But I would like to hear from you your comfort level, but also can you speak to, I know you can't predict how much overtime you're going to have, but in general, where do you see that overtime still being manageable and still allowing you to save money?
Well, so if I could explain overtime a little bit. Currently, we don't really have any overtime for Lowell. For Westford, we do sometimes have overtime call-outs for emergency calls only. Oakridge, currently, we get called out most of the time for any call that comes out in Oakridge, unless it's something that happens right before a shift or right at the end of a shift where there's already coverage. So my plan would be to cut back call-outs to only emergency calls. So emergency call will be a definition of a person or property in danger in progress. And that, depending on the costs or what happens, that may just be pretty much what all other law enforcement in the county does, which would be emergency calls for somebody a person in danger.
Could you give us some examples of calls that would not be answered?
Barking dog, cold theft call, cold burglary call, cold vehicle theft call. It primarily would be cold calls that wouldn't be responded to until the next officer comes on duty.
So, Chief, I'm just going to clarify for everybody. A cold call isn't when I'm calling somebody I've never called before and asking them for money, which is what my experience is. Cold call is when something has occurred already and it's not in the progress of happening right then.
Yes, what we would define as cold call is something not in progress.
So meaning if somebody comes home and their car's been stolen out of their driveway, then it won't be responded to until tomorrow at 8 a.m.?
Most likely. There's going to be a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas, and we'll have to come up with a policy on it. But the definition overall would be not in progress calls would be held over to the next shift if the intent is to save overtime. A lot of this will have to be conversation between myself and the city administrator on operational stuff.
Thank you. So are we allowed to discuss our thoughts on that and how that'll affect our city? Because I think that's really, I think for me personally, that sounds kind of detrimental to our service that we provide.
And I think I'd have a hard time approving a budget that did that. That's just wrong. We just had a huge town hall meeting here not that long ago about crime in Oakridge, and to now turn around and say, "Oh well, we're going to pull this stunt," to me is like you're just asking for the city to demand another town hall meeting and hang us all.
So can I, oh, go ahead, Paul. I just have a comment.
If we don't have the resources, what else are we going to do? That's basically where we're at. You know, we're trying to save money, and so I guess we don't have the resources, we can't respond. Okay.
Can I ask a question? This is Jan.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure. Chief Martin, we've been in this, have we not been in this position before where we have had to only respond to emergency, like happening right now calls? We've done this before, correct?
Yes, for instance, there was a time when it was myself and one other officer for over a month. So,
Right.
And we basically, I worked 7 days a week and he worked 7 days a week, and we kind of, when we had enough, we took a break.
Right, okay. So we have been in this position before, and how did that, I mean, how many calls did we actually have that might be affected by that?
I'd have to do the data on that. I don't know.
Okay.
Off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
I mean to explain to the committee and any citizens, it's the main thing is, as you cut officers, you cut proactive response to things, and you go even more so into reactive mode, just because there's only so many hours in the day and so much manpower, and depends on the calls. I mean, for instance, statistically speaking, we handle more calls than a lot of larger agencies per officer already. So
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I'm just picturing if there's this backlog of cold calls that aren't answered until the next shift, how much do those continue to pile up? Because when the officer comes on duty, they then have current calls to respond to as well as trying to get to the backlog of cold calls.
Well, for instance, to compare, it's hard to say like wintertime or summertime, but it's easier to show. A lot of times in the wintertime we have less calls. This last winter we didn't go down so far, but so in a busy summer day, some of the cold calls aren't going to get to. My intent is to get to every call when we can, but some of the code calls we're not going to get to in a timely manner in a busy summer day. So. But again, all this is speculation. It all depends on how many calls there is that day and how many calls that were cold that night. So.
How will this affect people's vacations, and what about sick time?
What you said? I heard vacation and sick time. Again, when people are on training, sick, or on vacation, or any other leave, that will again restrict our response. So it will be either cut response more or it'll be overtime paid out, which is something we will deal with no matter what.
I think we've had less coverage before, and the community was not happy about it.
Kevin, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people talking.
Yeah, so.
Sorry, I said that we had had less coverage before, and the community was not happy about it.
Yes.
It just doesn't seem like a good idea to me to get rid of an officer.
Kevin, can I ask a question? So,
Sure, go ahead.
Chief, thank you for digging down and finding ways to save extra money. I know that's not easy for you to do. So can I ask, was this in response to the last budget meeting that we had, where you asked departments, you know, to show where they cut? I was just kind of curious as to why the difference now, when the original budget that we were presented with didn't have that cut.
Yes, we were asked to look at cuts, and the reason we did the cuts the way we did them was my proposal was to keep our current people that we have now. The junior officer will translate to being a community service officer. So that position will technically still be a police officer and code enforcement. And the biggest effect with that will be is they will have to work a designated shift because their primary responsibility because of the grant will be during the Homewood smoke season. That person's primary responsibility will have to be El Rapa type calls.
Okay. And then also, I know that Jan brought up, you know, we've worked short staff before, and you commented that, yes, you had done it with actually 2 people for a month, but that's not really apples and oranges here. So when was the last time we worked with one less, just one less? I mean, because I know it seems like you added someone a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. When could you go back to a time when you had this level of staffing?
Well, we had a better reserve force than we do now. For instance, several of our officers were in our reserve program and then bumped up to officer and then went through the full-time academy. So a lot of times we went down as a full-time person, but we paid somebody through Labor Ready. For at least 3 different times we've had people work through Labor Ready, and one time we had multiple people work through Labor Ready. So we really haven't gone down to this staffing for a long period of time and not at least had a reserve or labor ready people. But our current reserves, my reserve that works the most, that works a lot, he has a full-time job, so he's and I kind of need him to do his reserve stuff because he comes out and does a lot of traffic on his days that he works on the weekends. And then our other reserve, he works pretty much the minimum amount of hours there is for the reserve program. So, and he is at a point where he only rides with other officers anyway, so that doesn't affect really coverage. And we only have 2 reserves right now
Thank
because
you.
our other reserve got hired full time.
Thank you.
So I've had my hand up for a little while. So your junior officer, that's included in your 0.0 FTE?
I couldn't really understand her.
Sorry. So you talked about a junior officer and what that person would be doing. And so was that position included in part of the 6.0 FTE, 7.5? I mean, where does how does that fall in there?
So we currently have the code position vacant. We are going to not fill the code position and change the name to community service officer so that officer can continue in the academy and stay a police officer. But primary duties will be the code enforcement and El Rapa stuff during the Rapa season.
So Chief, the money that we're getting from that grant for a code officer then, is that being added into your, I mean, that's what's going to fund this community, this change and designating this officer as a community officer?
That's more of would be a Brian and Bill question. We're going to fund the positions that we have, and then the way we have to do it to abide by the grant is that, correct me if I'm not wrong, Brian or Bill, but that money from the grant is $75,000, and that will pay for the services to do the El Rapa stuff. So it really doesn't pay for a position, more say it pays for the services, if that makes sense.
That's correct. I'll let Brian handle that.
That's a correct statement. They give us fully loaded $71,000 a year for that position. And for that, we have to give them the equivalent of 40 hours a week. But you understand that during the high seasons, you know, all the other officers that do code enforcement on the side, that time also counts. So it'll work. But that's a limitation, $71,000 a year from the grant.
And that is included in revenue in the budget, yes, if that's the question.
Yeah, that was where I was wondering, is that revenue then moved over to the police budget, or is it just in the general fund and we
reimbursement?
I don't, oh, it's a reimbursement? I think I heard that.
It's a reimbursement, right, it's a reimbursement type grant. So whatever expenses we incur in the police department will be, that they will reimburse it. The cash will come in, of course, cash will come in to the general fund because the departments don't have any cash accounts.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin, are you able to see the hands that are up?
No.
You got 2 Kevins here, so.
Oh, sorry. Kevin Gobelman, the chair of the committee. Can you see the hands when they're up?
No, not on the current screen.
I think only Kathy can see that.
Oh, maybe then could we have Kathy chair the meeting so people can be called up when their hands are up?
If you click on the participants, it brings up the list and you can see the hands. I can see them.
Right. I can see them when I do that, yeah.
Okay. I see now.
So, Dawn, you have your hand up.
So that, I've already forgotten my original question and I changed it to that question so that we could handle this now. Thank you.
So I just want to clarify that in this, what we're discussing would be keeping all the officers, but one of the officers would slide into the community service role, and essentially their salary would be paid out of the LRAPA budget. So that's how there's a savings there, but we're going to see a decrease in traditional police service if we do that.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Chief, right, Chief?
Yes, but we'll have to run with it for a while to see how it works. This would be something new for us. So if we weren't going to cut any positions, we'd be hiring a code enforcement officer, either one full-time FTE or 2 half-time FTEs was the plan. So that would have been in addition to what we have now. So that would have taken a lot of code calls off the regular officers' hands. So they would be able to do more policing instead of, because we get a lot of code calls. And if we do with the new model, the officers are still going to have to handle code calls to an extent. So
Can we also, was one of the things in there about cutting the halftime position you have, is that the line item number 10 in your budget?
yes,
So that's that other 0.5 personnel?
yes.
Correct.
So can we talk about what cutting that is going to do for your department, how it would affect the staff that's there, workload, and whatever services are provided to citizens?
That will affect Sergeant McPherson the most. Sergeant McPherson and I will have to assume those halftime positions, which we have done in the past when that position's been vacant. So that will put more on our plates. One of the thoughts is to close the office some during the week and have certain days open. That's also a what if, because there'll probably have to be some negotiation with the Lane County Sheriff's Department for dispatch services, because we have a contract with them now. The intent is when Sergeant McPherson is not here, if I am not able to cover the front office, then we'll have to close the front office, like if she's on vacation or sick or those type of things. Again, that will be a new planning thing for us. I can't say in concrete what it will look like.
But it sounds like if you have to close the office, then that means we have to go to dispatch. Does that mean there's an increasing cost? I mean, I'm not altogether clear on how dispatch works.
Right now we have we have 80 hours that we don't have to be in our office, but those 80 hours only count Monday through Friday, non-holidays, if that makes sense. So if we go over 80 hours, not including the weekends or nights, so that dispatch technically doesn't answer phone calls, so they don't have a call taker that's responsible for Oakridge Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And we have 80 hours of freebies. So if we go over 80 hours, then we have an incurred cost, and I think it's per day. Is it per day? And Sergeant McPherson says that's per day. And we have run into that in the past as well.
Bobby, you had your hand up?
Sorry.
Bobby?
Yes. My Zoom was coming out earlier. So did we get clarification on if this change was made based on what this committee asked for at our last meeting? If that is why Kevin made these changes, is because of our discussion?
I heard him say that it was per our discussion of having the department heads take another look and fine tooth comb.
Yeah, I'm really struggling with that because a lot of us are talking about how this law and how it's really harmful for the community and how we feel about it, but we asked for it, so it's really kind of a hard pill to swallow, and I don't know if I agree with this change.
Okay.
If we shouldn't go back to what was there pre.
I think that we
else.
can always look at that after we're done discussing. Dawn, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Kevin Martin, is it possible to cover any of what you're talking about in reductions with volunteers? Could a person volunteer to help cover, say, for, obviously they'd have to have some training, but cover for Michael if she was out on vacation? Is that an option?
I'll let Sergeant McPherson answer that in part.
We've thought in the past about having kind of a administrative reserve program here. The challenge becomes the process to have anyone here. They have to have a background check, just like I had to have, just like a police officer has. And a lot of people don't want to do that when they're a volunteer. And then it also kind of becomes these are the days we need somebody, if I was going to be on vacation or at training or something. So it was a harder program to kind of manage and find, it to be successful.
Okay, I should have clarified as well. I had a couple of questions. Well, these are more general for maybe for the city administrator, or maybe we're gonna get into this in a minute, but I wondered whether other options we have other than cutting in the police department.
Well, this is the CA. I kind of presented you the options that would approach anywhere near the money we need to find already. So, we can cut around the edges a lot and not get much for it. So, as I mentioned with EMS, it's all or nothing with the ambulance service. I presented some sort of smaller cuts in the admin department and some pretty dramatic, at least for the community in my mind, things in the parks department. So, the only place you're really going to gain any savings is people. I can tell you that right now. We've already cut materials and services to the bone. We've deferred recapitalization. We've deferred maintenance. There's just not a whole lot left in that M&S pot to save. So I've kind of offered you what I think are the savings that I would approach what we need to find in the absence of a levy.
Right, but where I'm confused, I guess, is that in this budget summary that came out today, there is no reduction in here, like for the WAC that we all talked about, or for the parks or library. So the only reduction I'm seeing on this document is the police staff.
Yes, the WAC, minimal savings. It is one of those things that's around the edge, considering you're going to have to continue with the utilities, continue with the insurance. What I would recommend is that we aggressively pursue selling the WAC while keeping it staffed, rented out, and use that to sort of help the city. But the day-to-day operational costs, given the fact that you're still going to have police to walk through here, you're still going to need cleaning now and then, and you're going to lose revenue and rent. It's really not a real big money savings to do that.
Tricia, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a question. Line 11, or wait, apologies. Let me make sure I'm on the right page. For line 12 in the police budget, it is listed at 41,600, but earlier we had a different number that was mentioned for code enforcement. Maybe this has been answered before, but is there a reason that number is different than the 71 or 75,000 that was mentioned earlier?
Yes, the 71 is a fully loaded, which includes benefits,
Yeah, includes PERS and.
HERS, health insurance, that kind of thing. So the 41 is what the person would actually realize.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Kathy, you have your hand up? Kathy.
Yeah, I got it. I had to find the mute again. I totally forgot where it was. I just had a question, and it's probably a little more general. But as we go through this, and if we decide to, if we as a budget committee decide to recommend to council that we do the levy, and then we recommend or we ask that the budget reflect changes. So, for example, I'm not saying we will, but so for example, accepting the 90K reduction, which would be a 90K savings from the fire department or from the police department, excuse me, and say the halftime reductions in the admin scope, and those are all put together to get us through. Then if the levy doesn't pass, then the process then would be to run a supplemental budget at that point and rework all of this again. I mean, it seems that makes sense to me, but I don't know if that's exactly how that works. Does anybody have thoughts on that?
Well,
Bill, go ahead.
Well, it's a CA. The supplemental would be required in the end, but in my mind, if it doesn't pass, if the levy doesn't pass, and we pass the budget as somewhat it looks like right now, we immediately would have to start making starting the next day, cuts in the budget. Wouldn't necessarily have to, since we'll still be within budget if we're cutting, we really wouldn't need a supplemental until later on when we really need it to balance. So is that the way you see it, Bill?
Yeah, I'm not.
Well, I thought that the amount for the levy isn't included in the budget as revenue.
It isn't, but we're going to have to. I mean, you aren't going to realize that revenue until the next
budget cycle,
November.
Yeah.
So,
And the revenue won't come until the next budget cycle.
right. So you are correct, but I would think we would have to start living more austerely beginning once we realize that the levy is not going to pass. Whereas I know that if it does pass, we can limp along and get to the next fall with some reasonable expectations.
So I just want to, so it sounds like then what the choices that we have here to do are to go ahead and approve that we want to go for the levy, and then do some maybe minimal cuts to the existing budget that was presented to us. And we would be able to keep that together, although I believe we all recognize that if we do that, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because we're going to be using the OIP fund to get us through. We have to do that. Then that's going to have to be repaid. And the levy money wouldn't come in until the fall of the next year anyway. So I think John brought up when we met a couple times ago, at some point you just have to say, we need to cut something in order to be viable, knowing that our desire is to replace it and put it back as soon as we can. I think I feel like what we're doing is trying to just come up with a solution that includes a magic number, and there just isn't one there. I guess I'm a little frustrated. I think everyone is.
I have something to say when there's a chance.
Okay, Michael, you had your hand up? Michael?
Yeah,
McPherson?
it's Chief Martin.
Okay.
I guess if I may speak as chief and as a citizen a little bit here just for a second. Telling someone they're going to get laid off is nothing that I want to do. With the asked to make cuts, looked at cuts, found a solution to cut some money out of the budget to get us going forward. I mean, the way I look at it is we have $550,000 shortfall, correct? We got to start working on that somewhere. And if the levy doesn't, if we go for a levy and it doesn't pass, we're going to have to make huge drastic cuts in police, fire, and city hall employees, because as the city administrator said before, the only place to really save money is through employees because we cost the most. So, but we have to stop kicking the can down the road. So that, I mean, that's just, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but we got to do something and we got to start planning and have short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans of how to figure this all out. And I don't want to make cuts to my department, but we will get by the best we can, and we will go forward, and we will fulfill our mission to the best of our abilities. And that's, I mean, other than that, I just reiterate, as a citizen, Kevin Martin of Oakridge, we got to stop kicking the can down the road.
As a citizen of Oakridge, I agree. We got to stop kicking the can down the road.
Chrissy, your hand's up.
I wholeheartedly appreciate what Chief Martin just said. I agree with that 100%. I also, what Kathy said before that about taking these cuts into consideration, maybe, I think is what she was saying, is looking at the budget as it was first presented, and then maybe if the levy doesn't pass, that we take a look at these cuts after that point. And I do see that that making sense to me, but I also do think it's intelligent to make at least small cuts out of the budget where we can. I know that that's difficult, but I want to, sorry, I'm rambling. I want to clarify, ask Brian one question first. That staffing model change that he presented with one of the full-timers sliding into the part-timer spot, was that a $60,000 savings in the fire department?
Yeah, I believe it was somewhere around 60,000, depending on how we implemented the other full-timer, whether how often you overlap.
Okay, so just Chrissy's opinion here is, you know, if we could at least chip a little bit at it in each department, I do think I would hate to cut it back as much as a person and a half in the police department, but at least if we could chip it back in each department the best we can, and then if the levy doesn't pass, we look at it to make the really, really hard choices in here, if that makes sense.
Okay,
Don, you had comment on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Is the current budget you're looking at actually is considering moving Captain Higdon to shift work? So it's already,
yeah,
savings has already happened. Just to be clear.
Yeah, that's, I follow you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dawn, you had your hand up?
Yes, so I feel like we need to discuss, my personal opinion is I'd rather see cuts in administration than in police or fire. So I'd like to have more conversation about what that would look like.
Okay, Brian, you got anything to say about that?
Not a whole lot more to add than my initial presentation. The idea was that the city administrator would go to a 0.5 FTE, which is 20 hours a week, day to day. I'm guessing you'll see me 2 to 3 days, or 3 days one week and 2 days the next. Less work will get done. I would ask that council pare back to 1 council meeting per month, because that takes a huge amount of time to prep for those meetings. I don't anticipate as much sort of aggressive chasing grants, that kind of thing. The other part of it is going to a 0.5 up front in the office in the assistant planner and assistant recorder. Another reason I would be asking for a single council meeting a month. In addition,
Well, coverage question there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have several people come into the office and we need 2 people.
you may not have heard that, but the office does get busy post-COVID. It does get busy, and it'll be many times be a single person up there. We would try to, sort of coordinate it with our court clerk. So there is maybe always try to have mostly 2 people there, but that person also does permits. And so permits processing would slow down. And administration in general would slow down. So you're just going to see less customer service for your citizens. I know it doesn't seem as drastic as public safety, because public safety is life or death in most cases. Well, not in most cases, but in most drastic cases. Whereas admin is not, but it does have a huge impact on citizens' perception of what their city is doing for them.
Okay, Bobby, you had your hand up? Bobby.
So to piggyback on what Chrissy said, I would really like to look at, for the police department, just cutting back to cutting the 1 FTE and not 1.5. Maybe not quite so drastic right this minute. And then my other question is the seasonal workers that work for what do you my mind just drew a blank.
Public Works.
The ones yes, sorry, I should have written it down. Because there are some temporaries in there that maybe that can be a cut that we look at making also. Because I don't see that here. And then I hesitate to cut the city administrator back to half-time, because there's a lot of upfront work that can happen that if it's not done in the front end, we're going to pay for it in the long run. So that concerns me.
Thanks. And
those were my comments.
The CA, I'll ask, I hesitated to touch the Public Works water folks, because seasonal guys come in and girls come in during the summers to some of the yard landscaping type stuff. I'll ask Rick to pipe in and see what he thinks the impact would be, because he fought pretty hard to retain those people.
So yeah, those percentages that we have divided people up, you'll see larger percentages of wages going to parks, City Hall. So one of the things that is a saving factor with our temps is the work they do. For better words, is I don't want to downplay what they do, because it's very important, but it's not the same skill set as our wastewater operators. So some of those skill sets that we have with our wastewater operators will kind of be wasted on mowing, cleaning, that type of thing. So those percentages that we had in that breakdown, that would change, but it would probably end up being a net reduction overall, though. That's my first thought in those regards.
So how many seasonal workers do we have right now?
Right now we have 2. We have one seasonal worker that stays with us all year long, And then during the spring and summer, we bring on 2. We've brought on one of those 2, but to keep the budget a little lower, we're waiting a little while to bring on that second one. And that would be the same mode that we're proposing for next budget, as where we would have one all year long and then stagger the 2 as we need them.
See, now I'm freezing.
Okay. So you've already made a little bit of a cut there then.
Yes.
Okay, Kathy, you had your hand up?
So following up on what Bobby said about seasonal workers, seasonal workers that we're going to hire, and I know you're waiting to hire so that you can save some money, but if you didn't hire seasonal workers, would you actually save this $19,000 that is in the line item?
So that all depends on which line item you're talking about, because the seasonal workers are throughout the
Well, I
budget.
see seasonal workers in parks, which is $19,000.
Right, the work
Number
would,
10.
right, the work would still need to be done. It would be done by a employee at a higher wage.
Okay, so would it be possible to put that work into, I mean, because I'm assuming what that work is watering, mowing, that type of thing?
That's correct.
Okay, is that possible perhaps to put that out to the community for volunteers?
I would do if you want.
It is possible. First thought to run through my mind is liabilities of running the machinery, but that's something that we could look into.
Because I think knowing the community is well aware that we are in a budget deficit and that that it's tight. I don't know what kind of response we would get. I mean, I know we have a couple folks that are just amazing and volunteer all the time. Charlie Nichols is, I can't say enough about how much he does, just quietly behind the scenes to keep Green Waters up. But I can't believe that there wouldn't be people who would be willing to commit to mowing once a month, and if we had a schedule. Now, granted, what that means is when you manage volunteers, that takes time to manage them, and you can't have a volunteer managing volunteers. So I get that means it's someone is going to have to supervise there someplace. But I'm wondering if that isn't something that we can consider as we move forward too. And then also I wanted to talk about admin. So the longer permitting, all the things that will suffer, or all the things that we recognized as needed to change in the way we ran our city. One of the things that we wanted to change and make sure was better was our customer service. That was a huge complaint when I ran for mayor, and many of you counselors, when you ran, about customer service not being there. And that has improved so much and is great. I hate to ratchet that back again because we just don't have the people to be there. Permitting, I don't know what will happen once we finally open up. Who knows? We may have a rush of permits, but we may not either. So it's hard to see how that will be affected or not. We are now in a position with admin where we are able and are going after grants, and that would come to a halt. The people in the community that are doing that with the support of our city administrator, and while he isn't doing all of those grants himself, is an integral part of that, and knowing that he's going to have to step back from that just kind of takes my breath away a little bit, because those are the things that we really wanted to move forward. I see that would be a savings, but half-time, I just don't see that is going to be advantageous to the community. And I get it. I don't want to weigh police, fire, admin. It's like, fire, safety, and paper. No, I get it. That doesn't sound like it is equal, but we need to have a strong admin. I know what happens when we don't. I know what happens to the community, and I know what happens to our departments. And I strongly advocate for not touching that at all. I like that Chief is willing to be creative and has made a $90,000 cut by moving people into positions, which was similar, I think, from like kind of what Brian did with the fire department already, you know, kind of massaging positions around, which I think is a really wise way to do that. I just don't know. I mean, I don't want to close the library. I don't want to close anything, but we're going to have to make some cuts anywhere. I just think the end result of reducing the city administrator to half-time is going to be reflected directly in how much we get done, how the council operates, and whether or not we want to continue with any forward motion that we have gained. In my opinion, it will go backward. And I don't think anybody wants to see that. We've finally gotten ourselves on a level where we are, again, respected. We're not in the paper all the time. We are moving forward within ourselves as well as in the county in general. And I see nothing but bad coming from that. But that's, you know, that's my opinion. And let's see, is there something else? No, I think that's all that I had to say.
All right, so Galaxy, tab A, your hand is up.
So that must be me. This is Jan.
Oh, okay.
I have to agree with Kathy, and I know that's not a very popular thing to do maybe, but if you think about it, we have in the past year, we have absolutely improved ourselves because of Brian and Bill. And I appreciate they're willing to take the hit, but I really think that is one of the worst things we can do. And I really don't want any of the departments cut. However, we've kind of been this route before 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, and we recovered. So I think taking a hard hit like Brian and Bill going down to half-time, I think that's the worst thing we could do. Just my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Melissa, your hand was up.
Yeah, thank you. I've been making some notes here, so bear with me. I have a quick question. First, the library says we could save 46,000 in personnel. Is that the librarian? Is that? I know we covered this early on, but my mind is not bringing the info to the front.
Hang on, that number is not correct. Let me get Bill on here to give you the correct information.
I'm sorry, were you quoting what was the figure you were quoting?
I was looking through the slides that Brian sent us for the offset numbers. And for the library, oh, maybe that was library, WAC, and parks would be a $46,000 personnel savings.
Yeah, it had to be more than the library. The library would be, I would estimate to say, if you totally shut the library down, you're maybe, you know,
Bill, it was 22K to close the library.
Excuse me?
22K.
22, yeah. That's all we'd save.
I'm sorry, did you say 22? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that clearly. 22?
Yeah.
Okay. I say that's probably optimistic. I just looked at the numbers the other day and I came up somewhere in the $16,000 to $20,000 range. So, you know, 22 is not that different, and it's possible, but I think that's probably a little optimistic, if anything.
Okay, and my second question is, if we just reduce the planning to half-time, I know, and I understand where you're coming from with the not wanting to cut admin, but none of us want to cut anything here. And if we're going to not kick the can down the road, we kind of all have to come to a compromise. So what about not reducing the CA, but reducing the other one? And again, this isn't going to save all the money that we need with us doing all these little things, but it'll add up to something. And my concern is if we don't do these things right now and we ask the public for a levy, they're going to be very angry at us because we haven't reduced anything and we're asking for more money after just raising the water rates. And we said, or it was said, to help pay for public safety.
So the assistant planner, that's probably going to be about $20,000 in savings if you go put her on part-time. It's an interesting comment you make about the levy and not making any cuts and people being angry about it. You know, I don't like cutting the police department, or Kevin did a great job, but it really is an indicator to the public on what life would be like without the levy. If it was beginning to look like if you reduce the police, it would become very apparent on what the impact would be if they don't pass a levy. Not to play strategy this year, but I mean that's a true statement.
Yeah, and I really like to say that I support the idea of more volunteers working in all of these departments, admin, fire department, police department, and library. I think this community is full of people that would be willing to step up and help given the chance.
Well, one person, the library is all volunteer, and the one person is part-time and very, very cheap. And I concur with looking into the parks volunteers. I think that might bear some fruit. And obviously we support volunteers at the fire department, but police department, as the police chief said, it's a special skill set and a special requirement, and coming across with volunteers aren't that easy.
All right, Chrissy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I've got a couple things here. I'm tried to take notes too. Part of what I actually had a note on was what Melissa said. It's hard for me as well to ask the citizens for more money when we haven't made cuts, but I also do realize that we are pretty close to bare bones minimums. It kind of sounds to me that the library is a bare bones as it is, just that if it's really 16, then that just seems so minuscule that it makes sense to have at least somebody there part-time. Volunteers in the park that Kathy was talking about, I think there's a lot of people in our community, and I totally agree that would help out. I personally love to mow lawns on a riding lawnmower, so I'm somebody that would help, and I think there is a lot more people that would help for that. The two areas I think we need to seriously consider is the halftime clerk in the police department, and I'm curious if the halftime clerk person at City Hall, would they really only be a $20,000 cut, or is that including benefits and health insurance and all those things, so that only comes to $20,000?
It's one of our lowest paid employees, and there are only certain benefits that go away. You might squeeze 22, maybe.
Okay. Has there already been cuts made in City Hall?
You mean with this budget cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to look at it as a little bit of chipping across the board. And you've mentioned the cost savings in the fire department with the staffing, and then potentially more. I'm looking at Kevin's proposals for police department and just trying to look across the board if we chipped away just a tiny bit at each one, where cuts have been made there.
But both Bill and I have frozen our salaries for next year. I'm currently reduced my salary by 10% to help, and I'm looking at some of the other exempt employees and asking them if they'd be willing to freeze their salary.
Okay, I didn't notice that. Thank you.
Dawn, your hand is up.
Yes, I have two things. One, since Chrissy just mentioned it or actually Brian just mentioned that him and Bill are not taking a pay increase. That's actually not what the budget we received reflected. So could we get a copy of something that reflects the change there? And then also, the levy doesn't even cover the shortfall that we're talking about. So we have to make some little cuts all over the place. And then we also have to consider that costs always go up. They don't go down. Salaries go up, insurance goes up, PERS go up. So over time, even if we have the levy that only covers 400 out of 500,000 that we're short, we're going to be even shorter next year and even shorter the year after that, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't see, this is not good. That's all.
Bobby, you had your hand up? Okay, go ahead, Brian. You can address it.
Comment on Councilor Kenyon's comments there. So, if the levy passes and we get a 399,999 increase, we'll make the rest work through cuts. And no, you don't see those salary freezes in the budget because it's kind of an on-the-fly thing, and I wasn't necessarily going to count on all exempt employees accepting a pay freeze. So I'm hesitant to put any of that stuff in there. It will, in the end, result in more revenue because we will have less expenditures and once we execute the budget. So yeah, and I get it. There's it's going to require cutting all over, which we do every cycle, and day to day we look for ways to save money. However, that 400,000, the levy, remember, is just to get us to a more permanent solution during those. That gives us 5 years to look at a special district or a different relationship with Lane County or something along those lines to live within our means, because right now we're not.
Bobby, you had your hand up?
Yes. So Kathy was mentioning massaging the positions at the police department. And if I heard Kevin correctly, we would actually be laying off the 0.5 employee. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the plan.
Yeah, it would be laying off 0.5 employee and not hiring the code enforcement position. So technically speaking, it would be a loss of 0.5 clerk and the police officer, because the police officer would go to community service.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bobby.
I would have to say I don't like the idea of laying off. I would rather see us absorb these changes as we go. So maybe if, say, we have a police officer that leaves, then maybe at that point we look at things a little different. I don't know. But I do agree with what Kathy had to say. Our was correct in that, and I agree with comments.
Kathy, your hands?
Yeah, so I just want to bring up, I mean, I know this is the budget committee, and I know we're talking about budget, and that means money and cutting it. So I think it's important to point out, though, like Brian says, if we pass the levy, that gives us 5 years to do what we need to do. To work on doing and it totally left me. Chrissy, what am I trying to think of? The fire, to work on doing an ambulance district, right? Special district, thank you. To work on a special district. It means what we need to do is work on those things that will bring money into our community. That's economic development, that is selling lots so that we can get things built on them, that is running an efficient and welcoming community so that more people will come in. That's how you increase your tax base. All of those things would suffer. You know, who's going to work on the special district? And I know we have a lot of capable hands and we can all do it, but really, who's going to keep that going? Who's going to push that? So just think about that as we talk about cuts and what we need to do in the next 5 years. So really, what we're doing is rolling the dice and saying we're going to get a levy. The 5 years is going to help us out because we know what kind of coverage we want for our EMS and our fire. We know what our community wants and needs because of our location and because of our age and all those other things. And so we're going to do a levy for 5 years. And in the meantime, we're going to work at building our community so that we have a better economic base. We're going to work at doing a special district so that perhaps we can have an increased revenue stream from that. We're going to work at using our fire department in more efficient ways to maybe making money. And Chrissy had alluded to that too, as far as fire season goes. And we're going to look at how do our volunteers in our community help augment some of the menial things that can be done. But we really need to think about all these are great ideas, but you have to have someone in there to be able to do them. So there's my 2 cents.
Chrissy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Kathy took a lot of the words out of my mouth on that one. And I know what she's getting at is we can't put our city administrator down to halftime and expect this stuff is going to magically happen. All those projects are huge projects and they take many players, and obviously the city administrator is the key organizer in that. So, my opinion that it's just not a good move to drop our city administrator down to halftime. And additionally, one of the things Brian said was bumping our meetings down to 1 meeting a month. And from what I've seen, council has been trying really hard to knock out a lot of things and get stuff done. And that's going to delay council projects as well, which are city projects that much more by bumping us down to 1 meeting a month. So for me, I am not in favor of having a halftime city administrator. That's all.
All right. So is there any further discussion on the budget? Do you guys want to take a look at these changes that we have in front of us today and maybe take a vote on what we want to implement and not implement? Or do you want to just go to public comment?
I personally think that we need to start taking some votes as to what we need to push and move forward and what we don't need to move forward, so that we can give the administration some sort of direction to bring us to make the adjustments and bring us back an adjusted budget that we can accept and vote on next time around. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
I have one more question for Brian. Is it possible to bump the hours of operation for City Hall down like Westford does and other small towns where they have, like one day their office is not open? Would that help at all, having that other clerk person being down to halftime?
I'd have to look at it. In my mind, with at that point we'd have 2 halftime and a full time. I don't know if, just hacking off an entire day is going to save. I'd have to look at the models and see what would best serve the city.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that you would like the staff to examine the benefits of everything that we've discussed here and come back with a leaner, meaner budget?
That's not
Or,
what I.
okay, so or do we want to bring up each of these items individually and proceed with telling them, voting on them to go forward?
I think that's what we need to do. I mean, I think we need to know as a committee, are we looking at accepting Chief Martin's reduction? Are we, are we looking at reducing the city administrator half-time? And we probably need a thumbs up or a thumbs down on, are we going to close the library or not, and just strike it or accept it? And then we haven't, and then I think we already have voiced our opinion as far as moving ahead with the levy. That's something that we're going to do, but maybe we need to do that too.
Okay, so I'll entertain some motions here and we can move forward. So do I hear some motions on the police department? That motion can be to accept what Kevin has put in front of us, or a motion to propose another alternative, such as just eliminating halftime and keeping the full-time staff, so on and so forth, as an example.
I would move to accept the reductions that the chief has given us today. That amounts to a $90,000 reduction.
Second.
At a second from Councilor Porkham.
All right, call for a vote.
Discussion.
Well, let's have some discussion then.
So that motion is to reduce a 1.5 employees.
Correct, that's the way I understand it.
Can we separate those two? Can we vote on the halftime or the part-time and then have a second vote or a second motion for the full-time?
Well, first we'll have to vote on the motion at hand, and then if that's
We would
defeated, we can come
finish
back,
this
right?
motion and then propose another if that was.
Exactly.
Okay, just my thoughts.
So do
Or
I
we
hear
can make a friendly
call for a vote on this motion?
Could I, before we
wanna-
vote, could I have a little bit of discussion? I would be willing to pull back my motion since I made it.
Okay.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
I would entertain a friendly amendment, Chrissy.
Can we change that motion to the halftime clerk position?
No, I wouldn't accept that, but I will remove my motion.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
so this motion's off the table now. Do I have another motion for the police department?
I second Chrissy's motion.
I'll make it formally.
What was Chrissy's motion?
I'll make it formally. I make a motion that we accept Chief Martin's proposal to eliminate the halftime dispatch services support clerk position.
I second that motion.
Maybe more in the winter.
Can we call for a vote, please?
Okay. Councilor Whitney.
Sorry.
That was an aye.
Thumbs up?
Okay.
No.
No. Okay. No. Nay. Councilor Maxfield.
Aye.
Mayor Holston. Mayor Holston,
Aye.
Councilor Kenyon, Councilor Kenyon, Councilor McClellan,
Aye.
Councilor Hollett,
Aye.
Councilor Forcum,
Aye.
Mrs. Yarnson,
Aye.
Ms. Davidson, Ms. Davidson, Chairman Goldman,
Aye.
Mr. Weinhold,
Aye.
Ms. Hooker,
Aye.
I'm back. That was an aye from me.
Ms. Davidson?
Aye.
Okay. And Councilor Kenyon, did I get an aye from you?
It looks like she lost connection. I don't see her on here anymore.
Okay. Motion passes, sir.
I'd like to make another motion.
Go ahead.
I would, oh gosh, now I'm not sure how to say it. I'd move to accept Chief Martin's reduction of a full-time police officer to a community services officer. Is that correct, Chief? 'Cause I don't want to do it that way. So we've approved the halftime, but I think we need to say yes or no to the other piece. You know, full-time position.
The other piece.
Full-time position. The
So
full-time.
the other piece being you're dictating how chief is going to move his staff to positions. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what we just voted on. We just voted on a halftime reduction, which I'm not cool
What
with.
she's just reiterating what Chief
Okay.
Martin stated.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Want me to explain it one more time real fast?
if you
Sure.
can, Chief, I would appreciate it.
So,
Thanks.
hold on. So the proposal as presented with both positions, this would just be, the second position would be to a reduction in force of one police officer position, a new position of community service officer, and not to hire code enforcement. So that would be an overall reduction of one FTE with no other loss of employees.
Okay.
Perfect. So my motion is to accept Chief's proposal of a reduction of one FTE.
Second.
Call for a vote, please. Or do you have any more discussion?
Yeah, I have
Hearing
some
none.
discussion.
Call-
I have
Okay.
discussion.
Go ahead.
So I know this goes back to what we were talking about, but this is a really difficult one for me. On one hand, I think that it makes sense to do the change and slide that officer into the community service officer position until we know what's happening with the levy. But on the other hand, I feel that I would like to keep status quo with the 4 officers and then consider doing this change if the levy it does not pass. I just want to throw that out there to people that that's a really hard one.
So I have a question or clarification.
Go ahead.
So, so we're voting whether or not we're going to accept the proposal to put the one officer from a full-time officer to the community officer. But if we vote no on this motion, it keeps status quo.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
So Chief, moving the police officer into community service means that the portion of their salary will be handled by the ARAPA grant, correct?
That's a correct statement.
Yeah, sorry, wasn't on meeting there.
Yeah, and and if they're in the community services as a community services officer, will they not be partaking in regular police work?
Yes, they will.
They will be participating?
Yes.
So you have no net loss in personnel by that choice, correct?
Yes.
But does it affect
we have a loss of anticipated hire, but hasn't been filled.
Correct.
And it would go to more on call time, right?
Yes, to a point, there would be some reduction in services. But we have to look at that model and see how it's going to take. I can't say until we start working on it. What in my mind, to put it in simple terms, what it will basically do is that position will be a half-time police officer or less, and the rest will be code enforcement, ARAPA, with the exception of during the Homewood smoke season, that person has to concentrate most of their work on ARAPA stuff. So in my mind, it's not set in stone, but during the off season, they would be 50% code, 50% police. During the ARAPA season, they'd be 75 to 85% ARAPA, and the other 15 to 25% police.
All right, thank you, Chief. Kathy, did you have your hand up, or is it just still up from before? John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to confirm what the chief said. Traditionally, community service officers take a lot of cold call reports and whatnot. And it seemed like that was a concern that these were going to be building up. But with a community service officer available to help alleviate some of that load off of the other officers, it will help free up the officers' time. And there's some other things that can be done with cold calls, such as citizens filling out the forms and turning them in. There's a lot of cold calls that have no suspect, no witness, no anything, and you're really just looking for a case number to provide an insurance company so you can get, reimbursed or vandalized, vandalism redone or those kinds of things. You're looking for an insurance number.
Okay. Any further discussion on this motion?
Kevin, could you please tell me what the motion is that's on the table?
The motion, to paraphrase it, is to move one officer to the community, become a community service officer, and that would therefore eliminate the hiring of a community service officer. Correct? Anybody?
That's the way I understand it.
Any further discussion on this motion? Let's call for a vote, please.
Mr. Weimel,
No.
Ms. Hooker,
Aye.
Ms. Bjarnson,
No.
Ms. Davidson,
No.
Chairman Gobelman,
Aye.
Councilor Kenyon,
No.
Mayor Holston,
Aye.
Councilor Maxfield,
Aye.
Counselor Whitney.
Robbie, can you hear it?
I care, but I'm struggling with it. Sorry. I didn't hear everybody else's votes were either, because I just cut back in. Aye.
Okay. Counselor McClellan.
Aye.
Counselor Hollett.
That is a really tough one. Aye.
Counselor Forkham.
Aye.
Motion passes.
He's not basically really staff that he doesn't do.
Can I go throw up now?
Me too.
You're supposed to bring your trash cans closer to your computer.
I'll remember that, Devin. Thank you.
Hey guys, he basically he has the same personality as now. He's just not filling a position, right? Half of position. So we're not losing any officers. We're losing.
No, but it changes the service level that we're able to provide for our citizens. So it doesn't change the people, but it changes what we do for our citizens.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is that El Rapa, they're paying them to do that, but I think if there's an emergency call, that officer is going to go. Am I right, Chief?
So what else do we need to make sure we are in agreement with, or know what direction?
I think the chief can take this for action, because it really is kind of the staffing details that he can do. We understand what you want, and we'll make adjustments as necessary. And just one comment is, I know you're struggling, all struggling with this, but as a comparison, the city of Cresswell, they contract the Lane County Sheriff for their police protection services. And what they have is about what you're going to see, and a little bit less actually, in police protection. They have 3 deputies and a half-time sergeant, and that's what they have for police protection. And it's a city of 5,200 people. So it's not safe to compare cities. I know they're very different, but just to give you some perspective.
They also don't have code enforcement like we do. They have code enforcement outside of their contract.
Brian, do you mean that we'll have less than Cresswell, or
No,
more than? Cresswell has less.
We'll have more than, because
okay,
our code and our community services officer will also be doing police work.
Exactly.
And we have a full-time sergeant, and we have a chief.
Okay, so the next motion, I think, is about administrative cuts, correct? Kathy, you have your hand up? Oh, okay. So are there any more motions that need to be addressed?
What?
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we reduce the planning position to half-time in the administrative department.
I second that.
Any discussion?
I know that this is the direction we've been talking about, and I don't mean about this position, but I am just really uncomfortable about us talking about reducing positions as opposed to reducing money. But I don't know any other way to do it. So I guess I just want to say that this makes me uncomfortable to have it that way, just like we just previously did too, as far as reducing a halftime dispatch or whatever. I'd rather keep it in the money realm. So I think I just want to go on record to say there's got to be a better way to do this.
Well, if I could have internet in the room that has my budget in it, I would read the line item and suggest reducing that line, but I can't. This is the only spot in my house I'm getting internet right now on my phone.
As long as it's not in the bathroom, it's perfect.
It's not.
Tricia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just curious if we can discuss a little bit more what that planning position does.
So Brian, can you fill us in on what the planning position really is?
Yes, it's many jobs that she does. She's your assistant recorder, which is elections. She's assistant planner for Rick and takes all those permits and new builds and follows up. She does business licenses. She does accounts payable. Accounts receivable. Cash receipts, customer service. Can't do water bills if Leah is out. So she's kind of a Johnny on the spot, Josephine on the spot. So, and her line item is line item 14, and the proposed budget is 46.9. So to be safe, you could perhaps make a motion to reduce that budget line item.
I'd like to change my motion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to reduce line item 14 in the general fund to eliminate
say it.
$20,000, I think.
Well, you can use a percentage, Dawn.
By half.
Okay. Is there a second
I
on the
still
revised
second that.
motion? Very well. Any discussion on that item?
I'm curious.
Brian, moving on, vote please.
I would like to hear
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to hear Rick's input on that.
Same.
So yeah, my input is that it would shift a lot more work onto my position. But if that's what needs to happen, that's just the way it is. But there's also a lot of other items that she does for the city. So it would probably, we would probably see reductions in a lot of the services.
Okay. Any other discussion? Let's call for a vote.
One more thing. Can I say one more thing, Kevin?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to point out that our front office runs pretty bare bones, and normally in an office it's important, while not always done, it's important to have backup for anything that happens. So effectively, if one person is out sick, water bills don't come to a halt. Or if one person is out sick, the work on permits doesn't come to a halt. But I know that we probably don't have full backup with each position, but there is a partial backup for priority items, and you would be eliminating that. So not only do you have less service at the front desk, which we can deal with, but you also have it's not just a little bit longer, it almost doubles the length when you start taking away backup. So just something to consider as you think about it.
Another thing is, if this levy passes, I'm assuming we will replenish these positions. Am I under the correct assumption from the committee?
That would be an administrative call, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think as long as they can stay within the budget, I mean, you'd have to do a supplemental budget to increase it back again if you reduced it.
Well, the
I
levy
think.
the levy wouldn't be applied until the next budget season. So is what I'm thinking though, is that if the levy passes the next budget, we're gonna fully fund that position again. And
Right.
I'm making sure that my assumption is correct.
Well put, Chrissy.
We can hope.
Yeah.
I mean, all the positions that were cut in 2011 ended up coming back, so, or not all of them, but a lot of them.
They did come back, Dawn?
No.
No, they did not.
They did not. Okay.
Any other discussion?
Well, can I have
Brian?
Brian
Yeah.
answer that question? Would that be his intention that we replenish that line item at the next budget season?
I think
If you have the money.
we'd have to look at it at the time that we get there. Like you mentioned, we will not see the revenue from that levy until November of 21. So you'll still be in a situation where you're restricted funds when you're building next year's budget. So I'm not going to promise you that we fund those. We would need to really take a hard look at it and see how we're operating at the time. We may have found a way to be more efficient and not have to bring, and reduce expenditures. So it's hard to promise to do that.
Thank you.
All righty. Can we call for the vote now?
Yes, sir. Councilor Whitney.
Nay.
Councilor Maxfield.
Aye.
Mayor Holston.
Nay.
Councilor Kenyon.
Aye.
Councilor McClellan.
Aye.
Councilor Holly.
Aye.
Councilor Forkham.
Nay.
Chairman Gobelman.
Nay.
Ms. Davidson.
Nay.
Ms. Bjarnson.
Aye.
Mr. Weimholt.
Nay.
Ms. Hooker.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I'm counting.
I think that's a tie.
Yep, it doesn't pass.
Yes.
Fails.
Fails.
Okay. Any other discussion of the budget or any other motions to entertain?
May I ask what all have we gone over so far? I've missed a lot.
Well, we've taken care of the police, and we were down in the administrative department looking at the assistant planner's position. Now, if there are any other motions for other items on the budget, we'll entertain those now. Or any other discussion of the budget.
I'd like to make a motion to close the WAC and sell it.
I'll second that.
Mm-hmm. Is it open for discussion?
Absolutely.
I actually think that motion is out of the purview. I think.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think what you can do, Don, probably is make a motion to eliminate that line item, which would result then in us having to sell it. But I don't think the budget committee can say, let's sell. I don't know. How do you think about that?
Okay, no, you're right. I would like to make a different motion. X that motion.
Okay.
I don't have the line item number in front of me, but I would like to, once Kathy gets it for me.
Right. It's many line items if you're looking at the WAC. We're
Well, I think that at this point we could recommend that the administration explore the opportunity of selling the WAC.
Yes, I don't think we can make a motion to do something. It has to be the city council.
Okay, I have a motion I'd like to make.
Before you
Okay.
make your motion, Don, I just want to say this. I think what we can do as a budget committee is recommend to the council that they recommend that the city administrator explore selling the rack, strongly explore how we sell the rack, the whack.
I was gonna make a motion to reduce the amount of spending on the line that has the whack, or the department that has the whack.
My concern would be is if we direct council to ask that the whack be taken off of our assets by sale and take the funding away from it. If there's anything we have to do to it to either keep it in the condition it is in order to sell it, or anything we have to do to make it saleable, we have no money in the line item.
Oh.
So I would have to agree that this group could recommend to council that they instruct administration to explore how to dispose of the whack. And then once that's accomplished, we will see this money come, we'll just move into other general fund balances.
Okay.
So do you want to change your motion?
Yes, I'd like to change my motion.
Okay.
I move that we recommend to council to explore reducing the fund for the whack by whatever means they can.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on that item?
Yes.
I have some.
Go.
I think that, I know there might be some, heartache that if we were to sell the whack, then all these businesses would be without a place to be. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that's not entirely true. There could be an opportunity for somebody to buy the building and provide the same spot for those same people. So, I know I've heard talk about St. Vinny's buying the building, and if they were to buy the building, I'm sure they're going to renovate it, make it a lot better. And in my opinion, they'll make it much better so that even more community services can use the numerous rooms in the building that are completely dilapidated, where the ceiling's leaking and on and on and on. So I had a chance to look through the windows in there, and it's in really poor shape. So I would love to see someone else take on this building and make it better for all of Oakridge.
Yeah.
That's it.
Does anybody know how long it'll take us to sell that wax? Year after that, before we can sell it. Like someone was saying, it needs to be fixed up.
It doesn't need to be fixed up.
Do you have anybody think they're going to buy it? The last time that there was almost over a year.
Paul.
Yeah.
That's not up for discussion right now.
Okay.
Bobby, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Back and looking at the library and different things. I think it's important to really look for what's going to cost to keep all the utilities on. The maintenance required to shut down. Just
Bobby, I'm not getting you clear at all.
And then
Yeah, I can't hear her.
Bobby,
I don't know what to tell you.
Bobby,
Yes.
your mic is cutting out. We can't understand what you're saying.
Might help if you turn the
I don't
video
know what to
off.
tell you guys.
Okay.
I think it's because there's a lot of
I would suggest that everybody mute themselves.
Can you hear me now?
Mic comes through.
I can't, Kathy. I don't know how.
Mm.
Everyone's on mute right now, and I'll turn Counselor Whitney back on. I can find her here.
Did she go off?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you guys all? Okay, so I think important with the buildings that we're looking at, we set the cost just to keep them open and get an idea of what the cost will be if we close them. We're going to have to keep on utilities and keep the insurance on, and what that cost is in comparison to keep them open while we make a small decisions. I think that's an important piece. We don't have those numbers to really be able to compare and make a good decision.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the motion was actually to have council look at all those things. So I do think what Bobby said is very valid, but the motion was just that council go ahead and take a look at all this. And I assume that would be included looking at, utilities and all those things you just listed.
Yes, I would make that assumption also.
Yeah, that was not the assumption. Okay, well, I am fine.
All right, Brian, can we have a vote, please?
Yes, sir.
I think Rick had something to say.
Rick, do you have anything?
Yeah, I would like to remind all of the council all of us, that there's also a high probability that a purchaser of the WAC could purchase it with a concept of completely obliterating that whole building and starting over. And so there is that small risk that everyone in there would have to find another place to go.
And that would be something that the council would weigh in on.
Exactly.
Right, yeah, just a reminder that that's a possibility.
Enough vacant buildings.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be something that council would take into consideration, not necessarily this committee making a recommendation. Brian, continue the vote, please.
Sir, Counselor Forkham?
Aye.
Counselor Hollett?
Aye.
Counselor McClellan?
Aye.
Counselor Kenyon?
Aye.
Mayor Holston?
You're on mute.
Aye. Counselor Maxfield?
Aye.
Counselor Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Hooker?
Aye.
Mr. Weinhold?
Aye.
Mr. Bjornson?
Aye.
Ms. Davidson?
Aye.
Chairman Goldman?
Aye.
Passes.
All right, moving on. So any other motions or any other discussion in general of the budget?
I'd like to make another motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we reduce spending in the library I don't know how to say it. By half. I move we reduce spending in the library by half. That would be in materials and services and personnel if possible.
Touch me.
Library open 3 days a week. Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Any other discussion?
Yes.
So how long is the library open now? So in other words, we're gonna go to the library probably 2 days a week at about 4 hours a day, right?
Yeah, right now, it's something from one to 5, is it? Every day, and then all day on Tuesday, I think it is.
Yeah, so we're looking probably about 2 or 3 days a week that's gonna be closed.
Probably.
But
I was thinking of things like reducing, like maybe even if we have to go for a year without buying any new books and just existing on with what we have. Or I don't know, finding more volunteers to run the library instead of paying the librarian. Can't hear you, Kathy.
the librarian kind of runs the volunteers, and that's an expense of $10,900 for all told, fully loaded. Materials and services line is 23,400, and the biggest expense is their contribution to admin overhead. Next largest is just materials and supplies, which I'm thinking is what well, books are $1,500 a year. So
None of that admin overhead will go away if the library closes.
No, we need to go somewhere else.
I mean, it's still the same people.
So I missed part of that motion. At our last meeting, Kevin had some really good ideas for the library, and it's something I've already started asking questions about. But I wonder how much money we can bring back into the library by having a library card fee. I think it would be very helpful to help with that, because it's not a very expensive line item, but it does provide a lot of support for, and it is, I think it's one of those pieces for being a municipality. Am I correct?
no, I don't believe the library was one of those.
Okay.
But I will tell you, maybe it would be interesting for the staff to take a look at those fee increases and what could be reduced if we shifted the schedule and bring that to either the committee or the council, either one, whichever you decide.
Just make a decision.
Whatever, 3 days a week, open library, 3 days a week.
I would like to see something come to council, and I've already started working on something myself. So, yeah.
Well, anything that legislates the library will definitely have to come from council. So, so I'm saying with Dawn here, I think what you're trying to say is you're making a recommendation to council to explore ways of reducing library expenses by 50%. Is that correct?
That's not what she said.
My motion was actually to reduce the amount that we would allocate to the library by 50%.
Can I ask a question to Bill again? I didn't hear some of the answers he gave. What's the current staffing in the library now? And then what would it be if we did a 50% reduction?
Well, the staffing now is the library coordinators. They're basically 2 days a week, 4 to 5 hours a day. And I don't know. So it would be half that. Maybe they would be there only 1 day a week. I don't think they could manage it given that schedule. I mean, it's pretty minimal already. They have to coordinate all the volunteers. Of course, 90% of it is volunteer work already, at no cost, by the way, unlike some other volunteers. So I'm not sure that there's, in a practical sense, you could reduce it very much more in terms of the cost of the library coordinator. I'm not sure if I've answered your question or not.
Yes, you answered it.
I think another thing that concerns me about the library is anybody looking to come to Oakridge, it's one of those things that they look for. Does your city have these things? And I just worry that it's something that sets up more failure further down the road. But I'm really reluctant to cut it right now.
I would agree with you, Bobby. Our library is one of the leanest libraries that we have in Lane County and does so much with what they have. And we have a large volunteer, really healthy volunteer contingent that keeps it running. And it is an important aspect of community development and economic development. When people come to town and see that we have an active library, it means a lot. And I think it's so minimal that I would really hesitate to cut. Although I know we're trying to be fair, I think a 50% cut is way too much when we only have it open 2 days a week right now anyway. But I would not be in favor of it.
All right. Well, we still have a motion on the floor. Brian, you want to go ahead and call for a vote, please?
Sir. Ms. Hooker?
Aye.
Mr. Weinhold?
Aye.
Ms. Bjarnson?
Aye.
Ms. Davidson?
This is to cut the library position? No.
Reduce expenditures by 50%, I believe was the motion.
That's the motion.
Chairman Gobelman?
Nay.
Councilor Porkham?
Nay.
Councilor Hollett? Councilor Hollett? Come back. Councilor McClellan?
Nay.
Councilor Whitney?
Nay.
Councilor Maxfield?
No.
Mayor Holston?
No.
Councilor Kenyon?
Aye.
Councilor Hollett? I think he may have been dropped off. Yeah, I think it's still a fails.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, time hack is 20:04, 4 minutes after 8.
All right.
Is this an open meeting?
Do we have any other discussion items that, or do we want to stop here?
I would like to ask if we are scheduled next week for our public hearing, or is that further out?
Should be further out now, for sure. I think we have to go through the approval, make these changes and go through the approvals.
Yeah, we need to approve the budget and then have the hearing. So that perhaps could be accomplished in one, but I don't think so, given where the discussion is right now.
I guess I meant, aren't there supposed to be 2 public hearings total? One during budget session and then one at the council?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, did we discuss the halftime for the CA? Did we actually vote on that?
We actually never had a motion on that. We had a motion for the halftime on the planning.
Well, I would make a motion that we do not cut the CA's time in half.
Well, that would be a kind of a wasted motion because we don't have to worry about it. Right? I mean, nobody's motioning to cut the CA by half. The CA has already indicated that he has made adjustments in his salary for this year, so.
Right.
Right, so I don't think it would be worthwhile at this point to do that until, we should have, if somebody wants to make a motion that he does go to halftime, and then we can entertain that and vote on it, and then it could fail or pass, right?
Well, I was just looking to make it official, but.
Right, yeah, it's already official in the budget.
It's official by default.
Yeah. All right, if there's,
I agree.
do you folks, you agree to adjourn right now?
I'd like to know
Chairman,
that the CA's position go to halftime.
Pardon me?
I make a motion that the CA's position go to halftime.
All righty, do we have a second?
Just to make it official, I'll second it.
You don't have to second something to make it official.
That's
Well,
right.
you need a second though, right?
We don't need a second.
Okay.
If no one seconds it, it doesn't go to vote.
That's right.
But
So
we have
once
a
again-
second now.
Well, do we have a second now?
I just heard one.
Rick, did you second it or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, let's call for the vote, please.
Counselor Whitney. Come back.
Yay.
Okay. Counselor Maxfield,
No.
Mayor Holston,
No.
Counselor Kenyon,
No.
Counselor McClellan,
Nay.
Counselor Hollett, Counselor Forkham,
Yay.
Chairman Goldman,
Nay.
Ms. Davidson,
Aye.
Ms. Bjarnson, Ms. Bjarnson,
No.
Mr. Weinhold,
No.
Ms. Hooker,
No.
motion fails.
Brian, did you get my vote? I'm
I didn't.
sorry. It was a no, and I'm sorry I died during the library vote, but that would have been a no as well, if you wouldn't mind putting that on the record.
Okay, thank you.
All right, folks. The only thing left was public comment. Do we have any public on the line here?
Let me check the,
We have Trudy with her hand up.
Hi, I'm Trudy Hammond, 4775 Berry Street, and I would gladly pay a library card fee to keep the library open. That's
All right,
it.
thank you. Anything else, Trudy?
schedule for the next meeting, I think we're going to go back into another regular budget session. The intent of committee.
Yes.
Then I would propose a week from today. Is that going to be acceptable? Same time?
I'm good.
I'm good.
You think we could work to a budget approval in that meeting?
I would hope so.
They need to approve the.
Could we get a copy in advance of that meeting by at least a couple of days of all the adjustments we've just made?
I'll try my best.
Bill-
I believe so. I'll try to get it all run through.
I'll flog Bill some more, and yes, and we'll get something to you.
All right.
Can I ask a question? Is there any other day that would work next week other than Tuesday? There's a chamber board meeting the same. I would like to attend, but I would attend this instead of that. I'm just asking.
When's your turn?
I'm open.
I'm open.
Wednesday? What day do you want to put it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm open.
What's the
Open to what day?
guidelines? What's the guidelines we have to follow for scheduling another budget meeting? Is it 10 days?
24 hours.
No, you're not held to that. No, you're not. So any day next week will be within the guideline.
Okay.
3 days posting ahead of time.
Yeah.
So does Wednesday
Is there-
work for everybody then?
Wednesday works for me. Chairman
Okay.
Gobelman.
I wanted to make a public comment.
Oh. Well, make a public comment.
This is Sissy Cutchin. And I wanted to
Oh, go,
say,
Sissy.
that I would gladly pay a library card fee too. I think it's a good idea to charge a library card fee. And I also wanted to say, when you sell the whack, you know, one of the things McDonald's restaurants always does that's made them so successful is they sell the business but not the land. And I think the city should consider holding on to the land. Just a thought.
All right, well taken.
No.
Okay, folks, is everybody good with Wednesday? I hear a lot of people saying yes.
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 Did you say that's, did you still think about it?
Thank you, everyone.
All right, let's call adjourn then, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
How much in savings did you have to save?
I don't think we explored the whole library thing nearly enough. I think, like me, I think a lot of people be willing to pay $10, you know, just like the outside, people outside the town.
Yeah.
I mean, be willing to pay $10
And
a year.
also that $10 a year anyways, how much money is that gonna bring? How many people actually